So what is a thinker like Heidegger really saying about death? I mean, this is not the time to try to give a comprehensive account of Heidegger's philosophy, of his metaphysics, of his total philosophical view. I, frankly, am not qualified to do that. But for us, for here, for now, what is the message here? How about this? You're going to die. I'm going to die. And emphatically, it's not human beings are mortal, or mortality is a part of human life, or death is a part of life. Those things are all true. However, they're the kind of truth that sometimes can just be an evasion of a deeper truth, because of course they're all true, but we can accept those things as the obvious truths they are without it really ever sinking in that death applies to us, that we die. That death is not something that happens to human beings. Death is something that happens to me and you, personally. I mean, in a way it's the most obvious thing in the world that we're going to die. In a way it's the hardest thing of all to accept. That seems to be much of the message here. As Gray says in talking about an earlier philosopher who's very influential in the 20th century existentialists, Søren Kierkegaard, Danish philosopher. At the top of page 117, Gray says, "It is hard to discover this truth, harder still to face it and live by it. Weak natures never know this mood of dread, this dread at the nothingness, this dread at non-being. Weak natures never know this mood of dread at all," Kierkegaard insisted, and the German existentialists hold that even the strongest of us know it rarely, because we are chiefly creatures of comfort, not seekers of truth. Jonas said that we, by in our deepest natures as organisms, are continually denying death, because the affirmation of life, the affirmation that it is worthwhile to continue the struggle to live, is always a denial of death. So in a way we can't help but deny death, but we can be aware of, at least sometimes, we can make ourselves conscious of death. Of course we continue, Jonas would say, every moment that we metabolize, we struggle, every moment we're denying death, but we can also become aware of it. And in a way, I think what Jonas is saying, this is our blessing, this is our curse. So, what is the point then in terms of existentialism? It is to acknowledge the reality, the truth of death, which is a very difficult thing to do. For one thing, it's highly personal. It's the moment, the existentialists say, when we are most truly alone, or when we most clearly recognize our isolation or our solitude in death, because, as is said by many, we always die alone. And we die our own deaths, not death in the abstract, which again is a form of evasion. On page 119, second paragraph, Gray says, "The first requirement in becoming aware of death as a possibility of increase of being," as this notion that the more we are aware of death, the more we increase as persons in our being, "is to recognize that death is always and ever my own, something that belongs to my very essence, as nothingness belongs to being. No one can take my place in death, nor can I, in this sense, ever die for another. I always die alone, and the very meaning of death, to me, according to Heidegger, is attained only in contemplation of my own death." Now, this being open to death, being open to the reality of death as the real concrete death of me, my mortality, it turns out to be incredibly important. That is, not only for its own sake, that is saying, well, you should be aware of your death. Well, I think what Heidegger is getting at, we'll get that into this in the next talk, is that an openness to death, or an openness to the reality of my own death, is necessary in order for me to be open to the world, to be open to truth, to be open to the true situation that I find myself in as a human being. So it's quite important.